Hello, everyone. Good morning or good night over there, and welcome to the Founder Skill webinar on how to build a newsletter funnel with microtesting on Meta ads. And so this is really exciting because it's the first webinar we do on this particular matter. And I've got a super expert with me, my partner, Tanner Holt. He's with us here on the show. I'm just gonna start off the webinar with a quick introduction on why this matters and why this should matter to you guys. Just quickly on about myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. I've built a nanotech business from scratch over 13 years into a 8-figure business. I've used Meta ads since the very beginning, 2010. I scaled my first business on Meta ads from 0 to over 10 million. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Meta ads. When Meta ads was with Facebook ads, back then it was still Facebook ads, was really was a gold mine. It still is, but it's become a lot more competitive. And but back then it was really just it was a cash cow. You could throw in a few dollars and you get 10x back easily. And so that's how I built my first business, with one funnel. And that same funnel basically over the years just evolved and became a more effective way to grow the business, to scale. And so it's really important to use that tool, right? And so now, why does newsletter why is it so important for newsletter? Well, newsletter have the same as newsletter operators. We have the same problem. We want to scale we want to get more subscribers, and it also just comes down to one funnel. At the end of the day, in 2025, if you have an online business, you need a funnel, right? So and it doesn't have to be complicated, but it needs to be optimized, right? So I believe that newsletters are a fantastic way to build an audience. I mean, to have a business, because newsletter have a advantage, which is they, as opposed to social media or Facebook or X or whatever, YouTube, it's your audience. You actually own the audience. So meaning that nobody can take that away from you. Now, since I already shared with you my past and how we scaled on Facebook, I'm going to share an anecdote here. When Facebook ads during the pandemic, there were these measures about what you can say and what you can't say. And one of the reasons my business failed and I lost everything during the pandemic was because Facebook, they just banned certain topics. And since we were offering a solution with nano coatings to eliminate the virus on surfaces, we were selling nano coating materials, and when we had actually a claim that was backed up by the government in Germany. We had a certificate that would back up our claims, and they still nuked our account. So we were left with, even if we'd spent over $500,000 on Facebook ads, they just in the blink of an eye, they just deleted our account because we supposedly violated the COVID rules. Why I'm telling you this, because that's really important, because it means that you're building your business on something that's not owned by you, because this could never have happened with a newsletter. Now, you also have the direct way to market your audience. So email is still the most personal way to contact your audience. It's different. You have higher CTRs, you have higher open rates. It's a way more effective way to talk to people. Somehow this has not really changed over the years. People still consider email as a very personal way to reach out to someone. And then there's also the various models of monetization that are available to you. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, newsletter have become a lot more competitive, especially over the last 2 years. I can point to one specific creator that has that I listen a lot to is Matt McRae. He has a newsletter called newsletteroperator.com, and he goes into depth into this topic, because that's just 2 or 3 years ago it was really easy to make money using newsletter, but now it's more competitive. And so you have to have like a business model that allows you to, for example, market your own products and services. You can't just rely anymore on sponsored content, which was possible just 2 years ago. Making a lot of money by just getting a good high-end sponsors that would pay for your audience. They pay for being on your newsletter with their brands. And so now you have to have a little bit more, let's say, a more solid offering or a business model behind it. But that's not the point of this today's webinar. Today we're gonna test. We're gonna focus on how to make sure that your audience actually grows, and not just grows with like some random people, but people that are actually interested in what you have to offer, that are highly targeted. Because the reason is the truth is that Facebook or Meta ads is still the best platform for where you can fine tune your target audience. So there's no other platform out there that has the same ability to pinpoint your specific target audience. Unless you have like financial products, there are a few restrictions. But if you have a product or a service, even if it's niche, there's a high probability that on Facebook Meta ads you can actually pinpoint exactly the kind of people you want to have on your newsletter, which is super important, because quality does matter a lot more than quantity. And I speak from experience, because with my newsletter, even I have still my own audience isn't actually that big. I have high quality audience, and so people now come to me and buy my services because it's a high quality audience. And so this is also very important. You don't have to have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but high quality. And now, growing the audience, you want to make sure that you don't overspend on ads, right? So here are the most important elements that every landing page obviously has. And so by testing these different elements, you make sure that you get a high quality subscriber at a reasonable cost. And when I say reasonable cost, I would say we should aim for $1 or $2 per subscriber. This is especially if you compare that, if you have a service and then you can have a retainer business, for example, and you can invoice your clients in the thousands, and you have a high LTV, then this is highly profitable, right? So micro testing, and this is where we now get into the nitty gritty, is it's different from A/B testing, which is also great, because A/B testing allows you to optimize your landing pages. But microtesting goes even further, and it's like a low scale method to start before you even get into the A/B testing, and it just allows you to be more competitive and have let's say a better cost, a lower cost, and better quality leads. And now this is where I'm gonna introduce my partner Tanner. Hi Tanner, how are you doing? Hi Tanner, how are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks, Roman, for having me here today. Perfect. So, all right. So, kind of like Roman was talking about, when it comes to A/B testing and micro testing, we really need to understand what is the difference. A micro test is essentially, it's still a test, but we're not going to run it to statistical significance. In a true A/B test, we're looking for that 95% confidence interval. Now, we're going to get really mathy and statistical for a little bit. But essentially, that's just saying that there's a 95% certainty that this will work. Now, that's great for, vaccines, medical records, but when we're in business, if I were to say, hey, you have an 80% chance to make, a couple more $1,000s, you're going to be okay with that 80% chance. Now, we want to get as close as we can to that 95, but in order to get that higher confidence, you need a lot of sample, which many people don't have, and you also need to have a big variance between your two tests. So if A converted at 2%, you would need B to convert at 5%, which is almost essentially doubling it in a half, so 150% increase. And that's going to give you that statistical significance. The problem is we're not always going to see those big swings. We have to be really strategic. And that's where we can test. And a lot of these tests, to kind of give a good example for a lot of e-commerce sites, you need about 3,000 visits, and that test is going to take a month, right? We live in a world that's so fast paced, especially with AI and content generation. You can't wait a month to figure out what you're going to put in your newsletter the next week. And that's where micro testing comes in. So instead of doing that traditional A/B test, we set up 5 different ads and generally a color block. And I'll go through the science of a color block in a little bit. But our goal is to just run it to 400 impressions. Nothing big. We don't want to blow our budget. It'll cost about 25 to 35 US dollars. And we're just looking for a signal to tell us we're in the right direction. And doing this in strategic steps allows us to craft the perfect ad, the perfect landing page, and while we're testing this, we may even get some leads. So that's exactly what micro testing is. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of an example right now of what we would be looking at. All right. So this is what I like to call our minimum viable concept tracker. Now, the reason why I like to call it a minimum viable concept, and you can see it's all blank, is this is a spreadsheet of opportunities. We're going to put our data in here, and it's going to help us rank and tell us which ones are the best. Now there's a specific formula we're using, but generally we're looking first, did it run to 400 impressions? Is it cost less than 50 cents? And is it have a higher click-through rate than 1%? Now over time when we get to the ads, we're going to say, hey, we want to stress test it and run the impressions to 1200 impressions. And it's okay if the cost goes up. We don't want it to go higher than 75 cents for most industries. Now, anything B2B marketing, your costs are going to go a little bit higher. But as you can see, we're going to keep track of our audience. We want to run just like any science experiment. We generally want to run the same audience. And then we're going to run our problem category. So each tab you see here is an element that we can test. And there's a few little sub breakdowns. But the first element we're going to test is the problem. I'm a big Clayton Christensen fan with The Job to Be Done. So many times we're bombarded with announcements that, hey, my product does X, Y, and Z. Well, the problem is a lot of people sell features, right? That speaker that has 20 gigahertz or whatever it may be. It doesn't say speaker that has clear sound generally, but that's what people want when they want a speaker. And we need to find that problem. And sometimes that problem might be, is your speaker not working correctly? Is it fuzzy? What's the problem they're having with their speaker? Is it hard to mount, right? Maybe the speaker works fine, but they can't place it where they want to. There's a lot of different things, and that's why we really focus on the problem. And we're going to focus on one of the things that I like to think about is we're going to do a quick overview, but we're going to focus on what you can do today to make a strategical, first step. Sometimes we can get overwhelmed with the whole process, and it's always important to be one foot in front of the other. The most important step of any journey is the next one you're going to take, and that's the same thing with testing. So our first step is identifying their problem. And I really love this stage. I will spend $100 just to make sure that I know who I'm targeting and that I'm resonating with the problem they have or a desire. After we do that, we take that problem or desire and we turn it into a headline. We want to make that clicky or clickbait headline that people are going to want to click, pique their curiosity. Now, again, going back to minimum viable concepts, we're not just looking for one headline that's going to work on Facebook. We're validating things that we can use for headlines as section breaks in our landing page. They could be subject lines. They could be used in our sales script. These are just one line attention grabbers. After that, we need to connect that headline. And this is the big thing. Congruency is a really big thing. And here we are in this transformation statement. And this transformation is going to go from, what that headline was to what result they're going to get. And we can look at testimonials and we'll use all this data to build images. And once we build images, we're going to combine the images and our text and we're going to test our ad. And this is where we start stress testing to 1200 impressions to make sure that our ad is valid. Once our ad is valid, we apply the same concept to our landing page because we know our ad works. Now, you guys don't want to just look at a blank Excel spreadsheet, but it's important to see how this is before we get into some actual data. So this is data from an actual client here that we ran. This client helps um, children with, sensory enrichment activities, kids that are on the spectrum, generally with neurodivergent or some type of autism. And you have to be really careful with some of these things as well, because you have to remember the ads that you're using, there's people on the other side of this. But we tested, as you can see, several different ads, and the one that came back the most clicky with a 6% click-through rate was true or false. I worry about who will care for my autistic child when I'm no longer here. Because even though the service is for these children, the person buying it is actually the parent, right? And then the next one is I feel disconnected, and you can use this to really help, you know, arrange and create that buyer persona. Generally, we always want to go with our top three, but let's just say for some reason an ad got banned, right? Just like Roman was talking about, you don't own it. Facebook can block your ad for whatever reason. You're renting that space. Well, now I can go to another problem statement or another one, and I have all these different ideas that I can play off, and I know what order to go down. So after this, we took that client's problem and we said, hey, what's going to be the best headline? We tested several different headlines. Some of these we thought were, hey, this is going to be great, and it didn't. And then we got this headline says the best way parents can help their autistic child grow up to be an independent adult. That's pretty clear and simple when you connect that to, hey, I worry about who will care for my autistic children when I'm no longer here. You can see that there's that relationship, that congruency between the problem and now the headline that we're going to use. Now we're going to
And
take that.
I have a
Oh,
question here. And there's, I mean, the difference in numbers is also just staggering, right? The 10% CTR versus like two.
yep, and you can see we kind of get lower and lower. And you're going to see here we actually chose, and this is where context comes really important. This felt very general for the client. Now, in an ideal world, we'd always use the top one, but this one still meets the criteria of, I mean, look at that click-through rate. It's still an 11%. Now, this one, if you look at the cost per click, it's a little bit higher, and that's the reason why. But it's only a penny more, right? So we're talking pennies. So it is important to have that context. There are times that brand or company vision might trump an overperforming coin, and you have to find that balance. But now you can have a data-driven conversation. So we went to the transformation. We used that headline. Hey, why family-centered games outperform traditional therapies? Now, this is what was really interesting here. Most of them wanted a free webinar, a masterclass, and then we did a guide and a report. Now, all of these still did really well. You notice, the click-through rates here are pretty high. And it looks like it actually just didn't sort correctly. Because if we go back here, our highest click-through rate was the guide, which we used. But let's just say that our data did end up like this. Webinars can take a lot of time, so we usually recommend to clients who are trying to be agile and quick to come up with a free guide because that's something you can produce, reuse several times. There's not as much work. And then you can build that webinar after you've had some validation. That's how it'll look here. But in this case, just because it's not filtering correctly, we went with, because if you look at this, this is only 16 cents and it had a 5% click-through rate. Now we can test testimonials. We want to test those testimonials. I took those out because it had some names on there. But we want that social proof and that support. But then when we come in here, this is where we get our images, right? And you can see free guide, how family, there's our headline. And we've used those headlines and used some generic images. Um, we also put images with family. They didn't go as well, right? Generally, you think people with family, like with the family, would do better. Now we're redoing this funnel currently because this funnel, there was some words that, the word guaranteed is something we were using. Facebook didn't like that. So we had to go back and retest, but now we can see where it's placed. And our second test actually started doing better. We actually found that just using the headline alone performed better than some of the images. And these are all things that we can find really interesting because we're testing, right? And then we can run those impressions higher, validate that test, and turn it into a traffic ad. So again, right now at this journey, we're redoing the images for this client. But currently, or I should say before, the funnel that was working was this one. And what we test, you can look. All these are different copy. A lot of these copies have that pain point, have headlines, and may not have the top headline because we don't want to be redundant every single place. We want some repetition, but not enough that it seems like we're a robot. We want it to flow in a story. And that's where I really like the idea. We always say it's, um, you know, person created, AI enhanced. Because then what we can do is we can use AI to generate all these different copies, and now we know which one is actually going to help. And at the end of the day, this was our winner. This is the ad that we unlocked, and it went through and it had some great success. This client spent over, tens of $1,000s working with other coaching programs. They couldn't even generate a call. The flow was then to send the person to the landing page where they got this free guide. After they submitted their email, we had an email sequence, but on the thank you page, it would ask them to book a call. And we were able to get calls, and this client had no calls before, and they were with the people he was wanting to talk to, right? So that's the power of this process. Now,
Amazing. Your presentation, and I'll ask at the end.
okay, we can go to those landing pages after. Because, yeah, we want to start with the ads because if you don't have a good ad, and this is where it's really important, right? If you don't have an ad, think of it like a pipe, right? If you let water out at the top or the very bottom of the pipe, you're going to get a lot of water coming out. But let's say you're at the bottom of the funnel and you only let a little bit out, you're not going to get as much water. So we want to focus on what's going to give more traffic to run through because at the end of the day, this is a marketing funnel, right? There's going to be people that see the ads, and if they resonate, they'll move on to the landing page. But if you focus so much on the landing page and your ad doesn't have enough traffic, you're not going to be able to run A/B tests on that landing page, and that's why it's so important to get this. But let's go to this problem statement here. So there's a few different ways to do this first one. I really like the true or false. But for example, someone on this webinar might be saying, true or false, I know the benefits Facebook ads can bring my business, but I feel lost, right? Another one that I can do is I can say, hey, I know the benefits of Facebook ads can bring my business, but I don't feel technical, right? And we want one variable because what we're trying to see, hey, is it technical? Do they feel overwhelmed? And it might say, hey, but I don't have time to do it myself, right? These are all very different angles that we could test. The goal for these true or false is it's something that they might say, and we want them resonating and saying, hey, yeah, I agree with that. I want to learn more because that's what's going to be the call to action on that Facebook ad. And now when we look at this data, we'd be able to say, okay, what was more clicky? Was it the time? Was it the technical? Or did they just feel lost? Right? Um, we can also turn it into just a quote. You can take this same statement right here and just remove the true and false and make it look as if, hey, if it's someone's talking. Hey, I know the benefits secret ads can bring, but I don't know I have time to do it myself. Because it kind of brings that quotation, makes it feel like they're saying it themselves. Another layout that is really strong, and let's see if I can find. Oh, we have our check note. We could say, started Facebook ads. Stretch that out.
So those
Make it
are basically
centered.
the different ways of just catching the attention of people, so that people click on the ad.
Yep. And that's why we're using the true or false. It's kind of like we could say a dog whistle to get their attention. The reason we use this color block, now a lot of people say, well, can I change this to my brand colors? At the end of the day, the color doesn't matter. We just want something that stops people to scroll. And there's some science behind this color block that we know people are focusing right here. And that's why we want to focus one variable at a time. What you saw up here, or going back down in this other one right here, let's see. I know the impact I want to have with my coaching business, but I can't get there. If I said because I don't have time or money, right? This isn't a good color block because, well, why are they resonating with it? Is it because they don't have the time or because they don't have the money? The better option would be because I can't get there because I don't have time. And then we would make another color block and test it. I don't have the money, right? Because we want to isolate it to one variable, but then we know that this is really what's impacting them with this scroll stopper. Because what happens is once we add an image, let's just say we run and we call it spaghetti testing. We just throw an ad. Well, what was it? Was it the image in the background? Was it the copy you have here? Was it your headline? Maybe you have three different or four different things of copy. Which one of those lined up? There an image could have lots of different things in it. Did you use a man instead of a woman? There's so many variables, and that's why we want to isolate it right here. And this is really what sets our foundation up because once we know what that true problem is, we can kind of scratch that itch, right? We want people to feel like, hey, we're reading their mind. We resonate them. Because as many people say, and the big thing too, when we come to this is like, I know the impact I want to have with my coaching business. That's okay. But what if I say I am losing sleep because there are people that don't know they can change. Now, this is going to be really basic, but we want to use some emotion. As humans, as logical as we are, we're going to be very emotional. So I'm losing sleep. I'm frustrated, right? We tend to have this negative thing. If I were to say, hey, I could go in and I can help you make $5 tomorrow. But if I said, hey, did you know that you're losing $1 every day? Even though $1 smaller, we're loss adverse. We're going to focus on that negative. Generally is going to have a higher click-through rate. But we could also do, I wish there was a solution. I wish there was, let's see, I was thinking of a client that had a really good one today. I wish there was a lipstick that matched my dark skin tone, right? Very simple. A client recently took this pain point, built out their funnel for their makeup line, and was able to get tons of sales because they were very specific. It wasn't about, they tested, I wish there was a lipstick that matched my dark skin tone. They also used the word frustrated. I believe the negative tone had more clicks for them. But they also said, I hate it when my makeup smears after 30 minutes. That wasn't as much of an issue as it was matching the skin tone. So that's the angle and the problem that they decided. And then going back to this tracker, we have that problem. Now we're going to craft a headline. We're going to track a transformational image. And for e-commerce, if you have an e-commerce, this might be 20% off. Buy now. Get X widget. Buy one, get one free. Get the exclusive interview. There's a lot of different things we could test. Then we make some images with all of that, add our primary text, and boom, we test the ad, make sure it works. And we do all this on click traffic to keep our costs low because we don't want to burn through hundreds of dollars because that's the biggest thing. A lot of people will just throw an ad up. It doesn't work. Okay, let's throw another one. See, oh, it didn't work either. But they have no
Yeah.
idea why it's not working. And that's the power of this process
Yeah.
is
Yeah, this
starting
is
out with
very
it.
common for founders. They have a feeling like, okay, so I've got a good idea and I'm gonna run an ad, and then I've got clients right now that spending like hundreds of dollars per day on a video ad or or some sort of ad, and they didn't even try to test anything before. They're not even a lot of them not even A/B testing. So it's very common because um, I don't know why, but it's just a reality. So
And a lot of
a question I have is the the process you just outlined for us, like the laid out here. There's this one, two, three, 8 steps, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
How
about
long does it
eight
actually
steps.
take each
And that each
step?
step is going to take, so each test can take about 24 hours. It's as quick as you can come up with the ideas and get data from Facebook and your audience and your how quick you're testing. So you get that data back one day, you use that data to make your headlines, and you can go, you can just go and keep going. So usually about 2 weeks is what we found, because sometimes what's going to happen is you're going to run these problem statements and you're not going to hit those benchmarks. Not every time's a winner, so you have to redo another round. Generally, the fastest I've seen people go through this process is 2 weeks, but it generally takes about 6 to 8 weeks is what you're going to look at because you want to make quality images. You don't want to rush through this, right? You want to make sure that you have everything buttoned up because if you just rush through it, you're not going deep enough into the person's psyche. You're scratching the surface level. You got to go at that onion and peel back those layers. A good thing to think about it is, Clayton Christensen talks like that job to be done, right? The person just wants a hole in the wall. you're selling this big, massive drill when you could just sell the nail and the hammer, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we focus too much and we just go surface level and talk about, hey, this drill has, 12 speeds. They don't care about the 12 speeds. They just want the hole in the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, it often happens. We make these assumptions about product services because we are often so involved in the process of creating these products and services and also attached to them, and we just love what we're doing or whatever the reason, and then we make those assumptions that are just often not based in reality. And it has I speak from experience. My business, in the past, I had this almost obsession about nanotechnology, and I thought that everyone had to think the same way I did, and it's just not. It wasn't the case. People are just not. They have their own reason. I mean, and it's the only way to actually know is to test, right? So, and it's
Yeah.
there's
And not
always.
just test, but get quality information. Because let's think of it like this. A lot of people, I used to work and I used to do neuromarketing where we'd strap people to EEGs, look at eye tracking, and it can be really expensive. Most companies can't afford it. But the problem is there's the white coat lab effect. When people walk into a study, they almost want to please the person, right? If I say, hey, if I go into a study or a therapy session, I say, hey, what did you think of this therapist? They're going to generally try and make me happy. On ads, you're in the Wild West. You're getting the raw results. Because a lot of people go to their friends and neighbors and say, I had a client who was making a physical product. And she's like, hey, you know, do you like this product? And all of her friends are like, yeah, this is great. This is good. Then I went and told her, I said, well, okay, if it's that good, ask them to buy it. Everyone will tell you that it's a good idea. They want to please you. But will they give you $5 for it? Ah,
Yeah,
no, it's not worth $5. Well, why not? Right? And that's where we have to
yeah,
look at the different commitments.
yeah. That's why asking friends of relatives is always a bad idea when it comes to business decisions. You should always ask the only true test is people you don't know, that they only have this is, at the end of the day, it's all about self-interest. Customers and clients are so fundamentally, essentially, really just they're just asking the question, what's in for me, right? So what's the benefit for me? And they only think in these terms, and which is fine, right? This is how it's a value exchange. It's and so, yeah, we this is why it's so important. Now, since this is gonna take, so it means that, just getting back to my question about how long this takes, it can take to 6 to 8 weeks, which sounds like a lot, but the payoff is huge considering the amount of money you would be spending down the line if you if you had no real data, right? Because this is really the real expense comes when it takes you months or even years to get actually a functioning funnel going. Because in
Yeah.
business, another truth in business that I've learned is that you only have to get it right once, and you can. I mean, it can be life changing. So
And a lot of people think kind of, going back to 8 weeks, it seems like a long time for a full funnel, but someone's spending thousands and thousands of dollars an ad. And in those weeks, you may only spend 800 at the max to validate it, where if you were testing an A/B testing, you might be out thousands of dollars, right? And that's capital that you've burned. But here's the cool thing too is for people that are looking to build content, this integrates into your website. You don't have to have the full funnel done. Yes, the main goal is to have a good working funnel, but that problem statement, you finish that test in one day, you can take that problem statement and go apply it to your next email the next day. You've validated that minimum viable concept. Sometimes we
yeah,
get so focused on the end result that, hey, I'm going to have a perfectly working funnel in, 6 to 8 weeks, that we forget that that journey is just important. From your very first test, you have actionable data. And that's the power that it's really easy to get lost into. And we need to remember that each test has its value.
yes, you're right. It also translates to those other channels, right? So how you communicate on social media with your target audience. Maybe there's also data about the target audience, what they care about, why they care about it, how they want to listen to hear it. So it informs every other communication down the line too, right? So not just the landing page, but it gives you like this data set that you probably would have guessed or never known, like never really fully understood, um, unless you go through that process. Now, I want to also, to the end of the webinar, maybe transition into how we use that same methodology, how we use the testing, the micro testing, and how we apply it here in Founder Scale to get results for our clients. And so what we do specifically for newsletters is that if you have a service-based business and you provide some sort of high ticket product to your audience, it's very likely gonna be it's likely gonna require a explanation, right? So one of the problems that entrepreneurs face when selling their services or products is that people are it takes a long time for people to actually trust you and then end up buying from you. So we need to sort of warm up our audience. It takes about, I think there's a statistic on this, or there's many of them, but I think it takes about 15 to 20 touch points for a cold audience to become warm and then end up buying from you. And so what we do in Founder Scale is we create lead magnets in form of educational email courses. We call those 5-day educational email courses. And those have a few advantages, since it's not just a PDF that you dump on people's head and expect them to read as a lead magnet, which is very common. It's a way. I'm going to show some of our 5-day educational email courses just to give you the audience an idea how they look like. So for example, this is one we created for a VR software developer. It's called the VR Offensive Blueprint. And what we do is first we need to obviously understand the business, and then we create a sequence of 5 emails, as the name indicates. And the reason for this is because this is how we're able to make it more digestible, first of all, and we also get more touch points. So when we can, so it's a very effective way to warm up a cold audience, walk them through your thinking or how you solve the problems you solve for your customers, and then at the end of that sequence, when after day 5, then you have the opportunity to add a final CTR call to action, CTA call to action, like for example, hey, jump on my webinar, or even just book a call. And so now that the audience has a lot more information, and likely you already achieved 30% of the required touch points for someone to trust you and actually buy from you just by sending these 5 emails, which is a huge advantage. And so we use micro testing to actually make sure that each one of those problem statements here are validated through the algorithm on meta ads. So instead of just putting out a problem statement that we don't know if it's actually what people care, we test those, and then we build a 5-day educational email course for you that is validated and grounded in data, real data, and then we know of that we know that the CTR is going to be high, and then that just translates into a landing page that is high converting and is actually it's going to be highly profitable, especially if you have a high ticket product on the other side, because then it becomes this funnel that you can, let's say you acquire a subscriber for $1 or $2, and then right after that acquisition, you can then invite them to your webinar, and then just you have them in every week in your newsletter. You can have the opportunity to reiterate, to repeat what you're offering. And so it becomes if it's done properly, it can become highly profitable, because then I have this huge gap between acquisition cost, it's called customer CAC, customer acquisition cost, as opposed to LTV, lifetime value of your customer. So if we turn that, if you turn those, just one of those into a retainer business, for example, then it's just highly profitable if done properly. Yeah. So, do you have any other point, something you want to add, Tanner?
I think maybe what a lot of people want to hear is, hey, what have we done? What are some of the numbers, right? Everyone always asks, what's the numbers, right? So some of the things that we have had, the cool thing is, and what I'm going to tell you are just in these sprints, right? This isn't the full process. This is just in one test. So one test, for example, we were able to take someone's cost per click and reduce it from 85 cents, which is still pretty good, down to 16 cents. Now, if that funnel goes through, that means we just doubled how many people are seeing their product. And if they convert at 5%, we just doubled their sales because we doubled their traffic or made that cost more efficient, right? So that's the power of targeting. And that was done just in that sprint one test, right? Another really interesting example, and it's probably more to me, is going back to the time, is when I first started out freelancing, I thought everyone wanted a video audit. And I was giving them away for free, which, shows my credibility and it can have some value, but it takes a lot of time. When I did these tests, you want to know, Roman, can you guess what was the first thing that everyone really wanted instead of a video audit? What do you think people would want?
I, you tell me.
A checklist. That was it. A simple checklist. And here I was making half-hour long videos individually when I could have just sent a checklist that they would have found just as good. It would have saved tons of time and tons of my marketing dollars. And once we made that switch, we got a lot more leads and I had a lot more time, right? Another one that we just tested, a marketing agency was running what we'd call spaghetti tests with image ads, and their click-through rate was a 1.75%. Going through this process, within 2 weeks, we were able to come up with a new image for a new product, and we doubled that click-through rate for this product. The product
Which
now
is
had a
huge.
4.95, and it was actually bringing in sales because it wasn't generic. It was hitting the problems. We were working with beekeepers. Instead of just showing, some suit that says buy me, we understood that people felt like they were in a sauna. So we said, finally, a suit that protects you without working in a sauna. And that resonated, and that headline and that image, adding a little bit of flames behind that suit, and then on the before and after, showing it nice and cool, made all the difference. So those are just a few case studies. And again, all those you can say, I mean, I guess the image probably took a few tests to get to the headline and build the image, but those are just the micro tests. That's part of the journey. I think again, going back to that mendability one, that conversion rate. Just the other day, I was coaching a client, so I didn't even build this. This is someone taking this process that we just showed today. She got a 50% opt-in rate on her landing page, targeting, natural health. Again, is that going to be the results of everybody who has come to us? No, you got to have, that's extraordinary. 50% is amazing. But it's just to show the power of doing everything right. Because before, when she was doing it on her own, she wasn't getting anything.
Well, I think it's a claim. We could make a claim that there's a very high likelihood that we can double or triple conversion rates and CTRs by applying that process to whoever wants to test headlines and landing pages,
Yep.
which is
So
amazing. And so yeah, so really cool stuff for our clients, and I think we're basically through. I think we have some. I hope this provides some clarity on the process, and of course, I encourage everyone to reach out for additional questions. Um, I leave a link in the description for a call to book a call, and or you can just reply, send an email. Okay.
or maybe anyone who mentions this webinar, if they want to reach out, we can send the template that I showed earlier, and we'll send them that free template. or we can talk more about, again, doing a sprint for them or something. But if they want a free template, put it in the comments.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Tanner. Thank you, everyone else, for listening to this, and see you soon in our next webinar or call or one-on-one strategy session or whatever. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
See you, everybody.